What's up, my good peoples? Welcome to the Be Transformed podcast, where we're talking about ideas that stimulate wholesome thinking into identity, purpose, vision, and action. I am James Anderson, and with me is my man, Logan Eaton. Bro, it's good to be back.
Yes, it is. I love hearing your voice. It's good.
Oh, I love hearing my voice, too.
Yeah, it feels good.
Goodness. Yes. Feels good, looks good, it is good. Yeah, so today we thought we'd take a peek at this. There's this strange thing that can happen on the path of purpose. And it's strange because I found myself recently there and I thought that's very strange. But there's a need that can arise whilst you're on the path, and it's a need to get recentered or reset, recalibrated, realigned. Because whilst you're on the path, you know, you can make decisions that unintentionally take you off the path in maybe just some like specific areas of life. So, I mean, you might be moving down the path, but in one area, right, a decision might inadvertently cause you to stop cultivating in a specific area, and you can hear the call to get recentered.
Yeah,
I don't know. You ever read about that? I'm sure that's never happened to you, but
no. Ever since I was born, I've been on the exactly right path.
Good job.
But no, it's funny because the call to get I guess the how you get off the path is very subtle. It's like you don't really realize it. And then
Right.
the call to get back on is very subtle too. You have to kind of be attentive.
Yeah.
So
it really is.
it's kind of funny how that works. Everything's very subtle, so you have to constantly be looking and aware, and your perspective's got to be there too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like the how you pointed out the subtle out and the subtle back, because it is very subtle. And I think it's cool because it's like, you know, we're going to take a look at Abraham. We've been reading Genesis, you know, together as a family. And so Abraham his story kind of stuck out as like just a great example of somebody who was on the path of purpose, but then would make these funny decisions that then he would get kind of recentered and then keep jamming. But I like the subtle aspect because life is not like a tightrope, right? It's like you're not in constant danger of being thwarted and, you know, have bolts of lightning coming.
Yeah, it's never that obvious.
Yeah. You know,
Yeah.
It's just like, it's not a big deal, but it's like you know, hey, what are you doing over there?
Yeah. Like we see the thunderstorm coming, and you can go inside and take shelter. But like the swaying to get off the path is just like a change in the wind. Like you don't really notice it, but then all of a sudden the direction's completely different.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, without further ado, let's take a peek at old Abraham's life. It's funny, you know, my my son wanted to go to this youth group. You know, Jacob was almost 13, and you know his friends that he's going to school with and stuff. They wanted to go to this youth group, and I'm kind of weird, so I'm like, I kind of don't want him to go. And anyways, so I was just like, listen, you can't fall asleep when you're there, right? Like, you do not just believe everything you hear. It's like you have to stay awake, because the information you hold shapes the trajectory of your life. And so again, I'm a little crazy. So anyways, so it's just funny. So we're reading, you know, in Genesis, and so he goes to this thing and they're talking about Abraham, but it's just funny because he's just real sharp, right? So he was like, the guy was wrong. He was like, he kept calling him Abraham, but he wasn't Abraham yet. He was Abram. I was like, that's awesome. I was like, yeah, I would call him Abraham as well. But so for accuracy, we're going to try to use Abram and Sarai, because we're going to look at kind of up until the point right when they become Abraham and Sarah. But that was just kind of funny.
That's great.
Oh man. Anyways, all right, bam. So we start off in Genesis 12. And I'm just gonna kind of we'll breeze through some of the story, but we'll just kind of highlight the main points. So Abraham in Genesis 12, God says, he says, get out of your country, from your family and your father's house, to a land that I will show you, and I'll make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And I'll bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. And in your family, and in you, all the families of earth shall be blessed. Right? So that's a pretty good start, right? That's a nice blessing.
That's a good layup.
So at this time, Abraham is 75 years old. So God says, hey man, it's time to boogie, right? You got to get out of your country, get away from your family, and it's time to start something new. All right, so Abraham gathers up all his wife and all his stuff, and but he also grabs Lot, which is interesting because Lot would be classified as part of the family that he was supposed to move away from, but he brings him along for whatever reason. So just kind of interesting, right? So bam, he's on the path of purpose, but so he's already making a decision that's slightly, off track, but it's not a big deal. But it's just one of those decisions he made
right
on the path. All right, so then they go to Moriah, which is, I don't know, where they were supposed to go. And God appeared to Abraham, and he says, look, he's like, to your descendants, I'm going to give this land. So bam, so he gets there. God confirms it, and then there's some a famine in the land. So they go to Egypt. Now this is where it gets really funny. So, so they head over to Egypt, and then this is where Abraham starts thinking about, maybe he's only lived where he's lived the whole time, right? So he's going to go into Egypt, and so this is what he's thinking. He's like, he talks to his wife, Sarah, and he's like, look, you're smoking hot. If these people find out that you and me are married, they're going to kill me and then take you. So just tell everybody that you're my sister. All right, so, but look at this little part. This is kind of crazy. All right, so Pharaoh's princes, like, I don't know, they're out and about. And then they see Sarai, so they go back to Pharaoh, and they're like, look, man, there's this smoking hot lady. Okay, so here's what happens. She ends up going to Pharaoh's house, but here's what happens. It says that Abraham was treated well for her sake, and it says that he got sheep, oxen, donkeys, and male and female servants, which means he straight up traded her to Pharaoh. It wasn't like he was out in the field, came home, and his wife was gone.
Yeah.
Or he was out shopping, and then she got a call and went to the Pharaoh's place. He straight up consciously traded her for goods.
Yeah. That's strange.
I mean, he really committed to that sister thing. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I don't recommend doing that, but so yeah. So anyways, so here they are, they're on the path, right? There was a famine in the land, so you got to eat. So they go to Egypt, but Abraham makes this decision, but this decision is a bit off course. And, but it's no big deal, right? So God's going to reset it. I mean, this is kind of a crazy thing. So, I mean, God said that in the beginning, right? He's like, I'll make you into a great nation. Well, there aren't a lot of details on how he's going to get that done. So, I mean, but Sarah, or Sarai at the time, is in that promise, even though it's not totally specified. So he makes a decision that's kind of off course. And so God resets it. So it said, the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house because of Sarai. And Pharaoh called Pharaoh calls Abraham. He's like, bro, what the heck? He's like, why did you tell me she was your sister when she was really your wife? He's like, I might have taken her as my wife. So I don't know what she was doing there at his place. Like they weren't married yet. I don't know how long she was there, but very weird. So yeah, he's like, all right, now take your wife, take your stuff, and get out of here. So Abraham comes out of Egypt with more possessions and his wife, but it just seems like there might be a better way to to grow wealth than trading your wife as your sister.
Yeah, it seemed like a lot of hassle.
Yeah, and then like Isaac, Abraham's son, does it later too. It's not a good path. But yeah, so all right, so God resets it, right? So he plagues Pharaoh so that Sarah doesn't become somebody else's wife because she's part of the promise. She's part of the purpose. And so they take off, get out of Egypt, and then they go to the plains of the Jordan. And this is where the herdsmen of Lot and Abraham start to have some problems. And basically, it's just they got too many livestock for the land. So Abraham's like, bro, there's no reason for our peoples to argue. He's like, look, you just pick a direction. You pick wherever you want to go, and I'll go the opposite. And so Lot picks these beautiful plains over there by Sodom, and then Abraham takes off the other directions. Well, as soon as Lot leaves, God talks to Abraham about the promise again. Right? Because Lot was kind of like still holding on to the old ways a little bit. And so he says, look, man, this land is going to be your descendants forever. Right? So not Lot's descendants. Lot just wasn't part of the promise. He says, and they will be as numerous as the sand of the shore and the dust of the earth. So he said, walk the length and the breadth of the land because I'm going to give it to you. All right, so then some time goes on and you get to Hagar and Ishmael. So again, right, so you got this promise with not a ton of definition or like details on how it's all going to work out. But you got this thing where he's like, I'm going to make you into a nation. And so Sarai's like, hey, look, we can't make any babies. So why don't you take my servant Hagar and make some babies with her, and when the baby she has, it'll become mine, kind of concept. So, they're being creative, but this is again one of those they're trying to make a decision on the path that's a little bit contrary to the promise, even though right now there's not a ton of detail with the promise. But this is one of those things that just doesn't ever quite go very well, right? I mean, trading your wife as your sister and giving her to another man, or trying to take a second wife, is just one of those things that doesn't work out super well. So Hagar gets pregnant, and as soon as she does, it says that she starts to despise Sarai, and probably maybe because she wants to keep the baby. I don't know. It's just. She's being used maybe, but she was kind of a slave already. So anyways, so Sarai's like, hey, look, man, she despises me. Abraham's like, look, she's your maid. Do whatever you think best. So Sarai deals pretty harshly with her. She probably, gets a bit physical. And so Hagar takes off. Well, when she takes off, she meets the angel of the Lord, who says, go back to your mistress and submit to her, and I'll multiply your descendants exceedingly, so that you can't count them. You will have a son, and you'll call him Ishmael, because the Lord has heard your affliction. He shall be a wild man. His hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. So that word's not quite as good as the one that Abraham has. But it's like, here's this consequence to an action. And this is just how God deals with it, right? He's like, God's not crazy. He's not all enraged. He's just like, all right, man, well, because this whole thing is part of Abraham, he's like, I'll multiply your descendants exceedingly so you can't even count them, right? That's similar to the call. But he's like, your hand's going to be against everybody and everybody's going to be against you. So it's not quite the same blessing. But
Right.
again, then she goes back. But here again, right? This is one of those made a decision on the path of purpose, but it was not quite lined up. All right, so when Ishmael's born, Abraham is 86. So he was 75 when they left. 86 when they had Ishmael. All right, so then some time passes, 13 years to be exact, passes. And there's kind of like, this is when I was reading this really kind of stood out as like the great realignment. This is like, all right, here's what we're doing, here's where we're going, and here's how we're going to continue to proceed. So this is in Genesis 17, and so I'll just kind of read the highlights. But yeah, so this is 13 years, because it says God appears to Abraham when he's 99 years old. So this is 13 years after Ishmael is born. This is 24 years since he left his father's house. So I mean, that's some time right there.
Yeah.
All right, so Abraham was 99 years old, and the Lord appeared to him and said, I am Almighty God. Walk before me and be blameless, and I will make my covenant between me and you, and I will multiply you exceedingly. Then Abraham fell on his face, and God talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be a father of many nations. No longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham. For I have made you a father of many nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and will make nations of you, and kings shall come from you. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you in their generations, for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and your descendants after you. Also, I will give you and your descendants after you the land in which you are a stranger, all the land of Canaan, as an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. And God said to Abraham, As for you, you shall keep my covenant. Right? Like he keeps saying like me and my, right? Like this is my covenant. I'm going to establish my covenant between me and you. It's just like, this is like the stuff that kind of I felt was like that realignment and the distinction of what it is we're doing, because he keeps saying it over and over. He says, so as for you, you should keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you, throughout their generations. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your descendants after you. So it just keeps saying it. Every male child among you shall be circumcised. This feels a little bit like a punishment.
Say that part again. What was that?
You want what? He said, oh yeah. And he said, every male child among you and you shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a sign to the covenant between me and you. So now there's some skin in the game. Oh my gosh. So it goes on, it talks a little bit more about circumcision. And then after that, then God said to Abraham, As for Sarai, your wife, you shall no longer call her Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. And I will bless her and also give you a son by her. Then I will bless her. And she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of peoples shall be from her. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed and said in his heart, Shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? And Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? And Abraham said to God, Oh, that Ishmael might live before you. So this is interesting, right? So God says, listen, I'm going to Sarai is going to become Sarah, and she's going to have a baby, and from that baby will become your nation, essentially. And Abraham laughs. Like, this is absurd. I wonder if this is kind of like the hope deferred kind of thing, right? Like he had this promise, again, not with a ton of detail, but it's like, they tried to have kids for their whole lives. Now he's 100 and she's 90.
Yeah.
He's like, this is not what the, so he just kind of laughs, almost kind of like, this is absurd. Just kind of seems like there's a little bit of emotion behind that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So Abraham's like, oh, that Ishmael would live before you. And God says, no, right? Just that realignment. This is that re-clarifying thing. He's like, this is like, because Ishmael was a decision that was slightly off the path. So he's like, no. He's like, Sarah, your wife, and so now he's calling her Sarah, your wife shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his descendants after him. It's kind of funny, Abraham got taken out of that equation. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. See, this is like beautiful. He says, behold, I have blessed him and will make him fruitful and will multiply him exceedingly. He shall beget 12 princes. It's kind of sounding similar. And I'll make him a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this time next year. Then he finished talking to him and God went up. So yeah. So this is the great reset or the realignment of like you're on the path, you're making decisions. Some of those decisions aren't quite in line with the path of purpose, so you get reset and realigned. Yeah, you got any thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, I was thinking when you said going back to when you were talking about the details not being revealed, and it's like, I don't know, when you set out on a mission, it's always good to be aware that, yeah, you're not going to know. It's okay to not know all the details right away. Trying to figure out all the details right away can actually be more of a burden, I think, than just making some decisions, developing an action plan, and then carrying out, that action plan. So, yeah, it's just, I don't know, maybe it's human nature or something, but we always just try to figure out all the details almost to the point of hindrance to what we're supposed to be doing. And yeah, sometimes it just takes faith to make some decisions and then trust that things will be revealed along the way. Because I know you said it before too. It's like if we got all the information right away, we probably wouldn't be able to handle the whole thing.
That Miles said that.
Or Miles, yeah, right.
And then I said it. But yeah, I mean, totally. He's like, you wouldn't even believe it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Right.
So yeah, it's okay to not know all the details, and I'm speaking to myself too because I like to have everything figured out before I like to know all the details before I make a decision, because it goes back to that fear of messing up, that fear of failure, and but yeah, it's okay to not know all the details, but like in Abraham's case, a lesson learned from his story is be like, it's okay to not know all the details, but you still have to remain watchful. You still have to remain connected and aware. Like your perspective's got to be there. Your eyes and ears have to be open. Otherwise, yeah, it's like those subtle things that you think are a good idea at the time don't turn out to be a good idea.
Look, listen, I'm gonna trade you for some sheeps and some goats.
She's my sister.
You might become somebody else's wife, but listen, it's gonna be worth it.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking as you were talking there. Yeah, the details will be revealed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think totally. there's definitely different stages, of on this path of purpose and walking out vision. And I think,
Yeah.
for me, like the biggest thing is like, right now, like I don't really get hung up on the details. I so much because I understand, like I know I'm going somewhere.
Right.
And I know that the work I'm doing right now, all the work I'm doing right now is taking me there. So
Right.
even though I don't have a picture of what that all looks like, I know I know what I'm supposed to do right now. So doing the work now, it guarantees me that future. So
Right.
I just get dialed into then doing the work. And like you said, just trying to stay vigilant. As that was just a good word. Like, if to stay vigilant, man, to stay awake,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's easy, man. You're going down the path, and you're making progress, and you're putting focus, but it's like it's possible to go to sleep in certain areas
Yeah.
and just not think it's a big deal or whatever. It's just that, but just to stay awake
Right.
is just real.
Yeah, like just aware. Like Jesus is always
Right.
talking about eyes that hear, eyes that see, and ears that hear, not eyes that hear and
Eyes
ears
that
that
hear and
see.
ears that see.
But,
I'm still working on that one.
I can't see through my ears yet. But
Jesus said.
but yeah, keeping your eyes open. So like just seeing things differently, not seeing
Yeah.
things based on environment or circumstance, and hearing things differently, not necessarily audible things, but
Yeah.
constantly trying to be on the lookout is and it's difficult because the distractions are subtle.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, the perspective piece, not just looking at the exact circumstances,
Yeah.
right? Like you getting that microscope effect, because that's what I found I was doing. That
Yeah.
I got zoomed into the conflict and the problems, and it it causes you to lose sight of reality, right? Like almost like kind of like disconnected from identity almost. It was like, you could get sucked into somebody else's environment, or you could get sucked into that situation so deep that you almost lose sight of who you are. And
Yeah.
and so just like you're saying, like keeping that big picture. But I think it's one, I think it's like you're going down the path, and you're making certain decisions. You're putting forth time and energy in places you should, but just because you're doing that doesn't mean you can stop putting time and energy in other places. And
Mm.
I think that's what happened with me. It's like,
Sure.
I mean, even for me and you, like the last time we talked after this recent one was like a year ago. It's like just because you're doing work in one area doesn't mean you can stop doing work in another area.
Yeah.
As I'm talking to myself.
Yeah. 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 Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. As you're saying that, I'm thinking, yeah, that's definitely me too. Where it's like you can get consumed in one area, but the whole thing revolves around it's a package thing. You have to be working on your mind. You have to be working on your relationships. You have to be working on your purpose, your vision, where you're going. And so it's like if you get too focused on the purpose and the vision and the work to get there, then you can kind of, for me, I kind of then, that sacrifices the mind, the working on the mind and the working on the relationships and the working on your faith. And so, yeah, and then, so are you kind of talking like there's a balance there that needs to be checked kind of, once in a while, just to check and make sure what one area isn't consuming more than the other?
Absolutely. Right. Because I think, some people talk about like you getting overwhelmed with life, right? So it's like, okay, I'm doing this one thing. This one thing's got a lot of stress, or I'm doing two things, and I can't do anything else beyond that.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, one, we don't ever want to be that, where we're like consumed
Yeah.
with like the stress and the whatevers. But two, like no matter what work you're doing, there's some things that just straight up are non-negotiables. You don't ever stop doing them. And I
Right.
think that the trick is that if they're not, if if those non-negotiables aren't defined, then it's hard to know if
Yeah.
you have nothing to keep track of.
Right.
You know, you might have gotten in, and this had been my case, is that like for a season or a couple different seasons we got into certain things, but then we moved, and then there was less effort put in, but it was really because it wasn't defined as like what is it that we're supposed to do in this one area over here. And so yeah, I just think
Yeah.
there's these non-negotiables, like, all right, if you're married, don't say your wife is your sister, right? Like I just think that's a good one, you know. And then maybe don't try to get a second wife. There's another good one.
Right.
I don't think that ever works out.
Right.
Poor Jacob, you get Isaac, and then Isaac has Jacob and Esau, and then Jacob goes to Rebecca, whatever Isaac's wife is. Jacob goes to her brother Laban, and then he tricks him, and he ends up marrying Leah, but he wanted to marry Rachel, so he marries Leah, then he marries Rachel, and then later on they're having a breeding war, and so each woman gives their maidservant to be, so now he's got 4 wives. I just don't think those situations turn out very good for anybody.
No, for sure.
The great breeding wars of the Old Testament. Yeah, that's funny.
That's great.
Yeah, so I don't know. So the next stage would be like, what as we talk about, getting reset, do you have an instance over this last little while where it's like you were on a path and then you heard the call, like you were saying, right? It was subtle this way and then it was subtle back this way.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think probably the last time we talked on the phone was probably a reset moment, and with little moments, before and after that. But I think that phone conversation kind of solidified it. But yeah, it's just easy to start worrying about stuff. It's easy to start worrying about finances, and are we going the right way with this purpose? Should we be going this direction or that direction? What about this or that? And it's just, worry is the great distractor, I think, at least in my head. Yeah, I think just, a lot of worries over the last year. And, but I think if you can continue to focus on those priorities, like the reading and the prayer and talking to people that you look up to, talking to people that have been through what you've been through, can help you get back on track. But yeah, I've definitely had, to answer your question, I've definitely had my share of subtle distractions that then you're like out in the middle of nowhere and you're like, how did I get here? But you can't make good decisions when you're in the middle of nowhere and then you're kind of frantic to get back on the path. Like those aren't times to make good decisions. So, but it's good to recognize that you're there though, because once you get back on, then it's like things are flowing and things are easier. Things that used to be difficult are now, easier. You could reset your perspective. I think I need that a lot, probably daily. But like resetting your perspective, it's like really, the only thing that's going to matter from this purpose or this vision is how you influenced, whether it was the community or people, or how you made a system better that to benefit the world or whatever. So it's like all these little things that cause you to worry now, aren't really going to matter in the end. It's the result of all this work and all this time that's really going to matter. And if God says, well, that's what I'm going to produce, then it's like, well, that's what's going to be produced. So worrying about all these things like Abraham did, about these little temporary things, it's yeah, it's easy to get distracted.
Yeah, absolutely. That all that worry stuff made me think about as a man thinketh, but I got to find thoughts of doubt and fear never accomplished anything and never can. They always lead to failure. Purpose, energy, power to do, and all strong thoughts cease when doubt and fear creep in.
Yeah.
The will to do springs from the knowledge that we can do. Doubt and fear are the great enemies of knowledge, and he who encourages them, who does not slay them, thwarts himself at every step. Some time ago we made these papers, and right now I'm calling them the words to live by, and we'll start promoting those here pretty shortly. But there's one word, and it's initiative. An initiative, I think, is power, man, because it's the ability to take action to create, and it's based upon like, all right, I can see what I could do, but initiative is like understanding that you have the power to do it, right?
Yeah.
Like I think a lot of people kind of be like, well, I'm not good at that, or I can't do that, or I don't know how to communicate that way, or write that way, or whatever, and I'm just like, I just hear people justifying inaction. Because they're like, well, I'm just not good at it. I can't tell you how many times I'm like, all right, I want to create this thing. I have no idea what it's going to look like. I don't have a picture. I just know like I need this thing. So I'll just start putting stuff on the screen. I'll just start typing. It's not formatted. It's not pretty. It's ugly. It's like, I'm just like, okay, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this. And then bam, because I just started, it just starts coming. And it's like,
Yeah.
people don't, not everybody understands that you got the power to do. You can create whatever it is you want, because if you got the understanding and the belief that you can actually learn, study, like you can problem solve, you can try, oh crap, that didn't work, let me try it again, let me adjust, let me tweak it a little bit. Like there's nothing you can't do when you understand that you got the energy and the power to put it forth, right? Like it was you got me going, Logan. It was Grant Cardone, right? He's like, look, man, there's no limit to your energy, right? You get tired, go to sleep. What happens? It gets rejuvenated, right? There's no limit to the amount of attempts you can put in. There's just something so powerful about holding the belief that then is reflected in your actions that you can. It's beautiful, and it's hard to see people miss that.
Yeah.
But it's like, I'm just, doing something with my family, and we're doing some work, and I'm telling them this. I'm like, listen, we are people who do. You got the power to put forth the effort. Not everybody's willing to put forth the effort. I mean, you are strong. You put forth the effort and you work it and you make things beautiful. You add value through what you do. It's like
Amen.
so what you were talking about, you're like, it's at the end of your life, the worries and the hesitations aren't the thing that's going to be like, okay, I really wish I worried more. I wish I did less, It's like, man, we were put on this earth to work things of like beauty and skill and value and impact and influence. And it's
Right.
only through action that we get that stuff done.
Right.
Yeah, that's just beautiful. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's easy to, like you were saying, the reason I think people don't do something is that first step. It's like that first step of the unknown, where it's like you have to put everything you know and everything you are on the line and see what the reaction is going to be, or what the consequence is going to be, or what the result's going to be. And that result is a direct, it's directly correlated to who you are, because you are the one on the line. You're the one putting forth the action. And that's, I think, why a lot of people are like, I don't know. There's a lot of reasons I shouldn't do this. And like I was thinking the other day, I was like, this is okay. So we're trying something new, and this is the first time we're trying it. And I was like, man, I don't know, because what if this happens and this and this? Like maybe I should just, buy this piece of equipment and just do it this way. That's easy, but I know the right way to do it. I know the way I should do it, but it's so easy to convince yourself to be like, it's just, there's a lot of steps in that, and I'm not, fully experienced in that. And, it's like, just like starting a business or getting a degree or something. It's like, there's a lot of steps involved in that, and I'm not experienced in that, but that's what causes a lot of people to just be like, I'll sit on the sidelines for now.
Yeah.
But it's like you have to put, like you said, we're strong, we have ability, we have opportunity. There's vision within us, and if God truly flows to and through us, then we can go out and give it a shot, and just start, refining it, and then
Yes.
becoming the expert at it.
Right.
But that doesn't happen unless you take that first step into the unknown.
Yeah. No, and it's true. And it's like, that first step it's like stupid, man. It's even like with the project I'm working on right now. I'm making all these videos for work, kind of creating this like how-to program. And even like before I leave my house with like all my gear, I'm like nervous. I'm like, what if it doesn't work, or what if it sucks, or what if somebody walks in while I'm doing it, or whatever. It's like while I'm videoing, and then like so there's this layer of uncomfortableness because this stuff, man, I'm just like thinking what it needs to happen, what I need to communicate. I'm thinking about these, how it all works together to best communicate what it is I'm trying to communicate. Yeah, and then you're just like, all right, well, what if you go there and it doesn't work out, whatever. But then I'll just shut up and I'll go, right? Because I'm like, I have to get this stuff done. I've said this is what I'm doing, and I got to go do it, and this is what I'm here to do. But still, I still find myself just even in that stuff where it's like I still have to cross the barrier or the river of the uncomfortable.
Yeah.
There's like, I got that my pathway to the fulfillment of my dream is through this freaking river. And it's not huge, right? It's subtle. I'm aware of it, but then I walk it, it's like any new project, whatever. I'm just like, well, what if it sucks? I'm like, well, okay, I don't know. It's not going to get any better if I don't freaking start, So it's like, so 100%. I think that uncomfortableness again is also another one of those layers where it's like, if you're not, you kind of got to get used to it. And maybe I'm more used to it in certain areas than others, but you got to cross the river.
Yeah, but like what you were saying too is like you motivated me to go out and take that first step, just like that belief of just like, no, you have strength, you have power and ability, you have the Holy Spirit. You have the ability to make accurate and precise decisions that, ultimately will have good outcomes. And so believing that is hard to do sometimes when you're standing on the banks, but it's true.
Yeah.
All of it's true.
All of it's true. Yeah, I mean, I just want to infuse in you, bro, that I believe 100% in you. I mean, you have like the fact that you would stand on the sidelines and wonder if you could is like beyond me, because it's like like I just it's just like if you could just see the correct image of who you are, like you got it. It's already done. And I think for me it's like the mentality is I could give a rip about being perfect. I don't care.
Yeah.
I am committed to working it out to completion. So it's like I know that I must begin. It's like, again, when I'm trying to create some document and I'm like, I have no idea how to make this, but I know I need it. And so I'll just start putting stuff on the screen. It's like that. I know if I do the work, somehow it all comes together.
Yeah.
But if I don't, and I just wait till I can see the whole picture, that junk never happens. Yeah. So it's like I just have to begin, which is weird because it's uncomfortable. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, I don't know. But I got the experience from a past experience where me and my wife were creating this whole document, and like we would show up and I'm like, I don't even know what to do next. And I would just start talking and she would just start typing. And it's like we created this whole document that didn't exist before. And like, it's like one that we use at work all the time, but it's like, you just have to start. And if you're committed to working it out, then it's going to be amazing. You just don't have to care about the process of learning. because you're
Yeah.
everything we know how to do with any kind of skill, we learned how to do it, and it's
Right.
easy to forget that.
Right.
So it's just like any new thing, you're going to figure it out. It's going to get better only if you continue to put out.
Yeah. 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 You have to go out into the waves, into the open ocean to kind of get some experience out there. You can't like we were brought up in the bay, you know, where it was like everything was kind of organized and structured. And it's like then you have to leave that bay or that safe zone and go out into the ocean, and you don't know how to navigate the ocean until you navigate the ocean.
Totally. Well, there's that saying, right? It's like smooth seas never produced a good sailor.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Right? It's like you had to go through the experience of rough seas to know how to handle it
yeah,
and to
right,
build that confidence.
right.
So, no,
Amen.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, so as I think about like this reset, I thought it was super funny because I was on the path of purpose, but then I went to sleep in an area and I knew it, but I didn't know what to do about it. And it was funny because I'm doing this work and I'm creating this program and it's interesting because it's like the work that I'm doing, like I know I'm supposed to be doing it, right? Like the work is important and there's demands for the work that I'm doing to be completed. So it's like that's one motivating factor. But a second layer of motivation that I have is that I know that this work is actually the pathway to my future. So it's like I think it's like the work itself is creating habits, action, and like focus and work ethic in these specific areas that I need, period. And so I know that one, the work is important, and two, it's actually taking me to my future. The other thing is that there was like this layer of satisfaction as well because it's making demands on my potential. It's like it's drawing the stuff out of me, and
Right.
you like I'm putting stuff on the screen, and I don't know. I'm like I don't know, right? Like I'm making it. It's coming out of me. We're working it, right? We're like it's beautiful, man.
Right.
It's a divine expression to create. Period.
Right.
Period.
Yeah.
So there's all this going on, and then there's some weird stuff going on, and we're doing this, and then we got a BT group with the people we work closest with, right? And we're reading like BT books and high quality ideas, and we're talking about it. Wonderful things are happening, and yet there's still this piece of me that went dormant, and it's funny to hear me kind of talk about this now because it's funny to communicate what God spoke to you like after the fact and after you kind of processed it. I feel like when I say it, it's really funny because sometimes you hear people talk, they'll tell you what God's telling them, but it's through their filter. I'm like, God would never talk to me like that.
That is not what I'm hearing.
But well, no, it's like even just the way they're communicating it. So anyways, it's just kind of, I just think it's funny that when I communicate, when I'm just thinking about what God said, I'm communicating in a way that just makes me laugh. And for me, it's encouraging and it's just, and it's funny.
For sure.
But yeah, I just like you said though, cause we're talking about being on the path and then you make a decision that kind of takes you away from the path. And like you said, it's subtle. It was subtle out and then it was subtle back in. And so I knew I had went dormant in this area. And that decision, if there was a decision, and that decision was kind of like maybe under the pretense of like not rocking the boat. Because if I've learned one thing, I'm a bit of a disruptor.
Sure.
And it's not pretty. And that's not a pretty job. And so I try to not do it. So anyways, there was a decision I made, I think, and a part of me kind of went to sleep and I knew it, but whatever, right? And so there's things I didn't do that I should have done. And because I didn't, it's just like this piece stayed dormant. So anyways, so I'm doing this work. It's making demands on my potential. It's part of my future. Where we got our BT group, we're reading books, and still, man, like a couple months ago, God's just like, hey man, what about BT? And I'm like, oh, well, we got our group, we're reading books and we're talking about stuff and this is wonderful. And he's like, yeah, what about the podcast? And I'm like, well, like I'd do the podcast if I had something to talk about, right? If I, if I was ever so inspired. It was that statement right there was interesting. Because again, it goes back to the thing where it's like, I was like, well, I'm already doing work, right? I'm already using my creative faculties.
Right.
And if I was to do this, one, the fear aspect, right? I'm like, I don't know if I could sustain it. Whenever I try to start something, I'm good for like 1 or 2 sessions. And then I'm like, well, now what do I do? So it's like the fear of being able to sustain it, right? Which then prevents you from doing it. Yeah. But again, and then the second thing was like, well, bro, man, that sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
And it's okay. So this is now, it's filtered through my perspective. And he's just like, quit being a little beach ball. He's like, you haven't even begun. He's like, with BT, like you've just barely even started. You've barely done anything. He's like, and he's like, and the and again, this is just filtered through me right now.
Sure.
And so it's for me, this is hilarious. And it's just like, it's like, oh, you think you're using your creative faculties and you're doing, he's like, bro, you're barely even doing anything. Oh my gosh. But like for me, it's like, and that's not like how it went down in the moment, but just as I process it. But for me, it's just like all that stuff, just, it speaks to the potential that's just like pounding on the door saying, let me out. Yeah. And so there was this call and I just found it so fascinating because I was like, I'm on the path. How could I have let like the main piece of my call go to sleep? But yeah, it's just like that. It was that subtle and then it was subtle in because, God's like, hey man, what about BT? And so, I had a small conversation, but there was like, all that other stuff I said wasn't there yet. And I was like, all right, well, this is like a seed. I'll just let it marinate, right? I'll just let that word kind of whatever. But it was like this whole reality of like, I wanted it to be easy. And I think it's like, I think the other thing is that I wanted the work that I had done in the past to be able to sustain my current growth. And that just wasn't going to happen. It's like I wrote this article and because that, after a couple of these sessions, I'm like, all right, I got to start, thinking. Because this was the whole thing, right? It's like I didn't want to work. Like I was like, well, I would do it, but it's not like coming to me. And he's just like, what the? He's like, shut up and like use your brain, like start thinking. And so, I said I was writing this article. Yeah, it's just funny, just talking about this concept, right? The fact that you got to keep these things cultivated. Like there's something about life that doesn't want you to be lazy, right? If you stop using something, you start to lose it. And so there's just something about it where it's just like, God had no intentions of us just sitting around doing nothing.
Yeah.
Like that's not his purpose.
Right.
And it's like, use whatever example you want, but it's like, if I used to be able to bench 400 pounds and run a 6-minute mile, and a 6-minute mile, that would have been when I was in like the 6th grade.
That would have been in a past life. For
that
me.
would have been maybe it was 7 minute. Maybe it was 7 minute. Yeah, 7 minute. Yeah, I could run a mile. Let's just put it that way. Now I could walk a mile for sure. I could definitely ride a bike for a mile. But it's like, okay, I was doing all this work. I was disciplined. I was working out 5 days a week, blah, blah. I could do, and I could produce this much. Well, if 2 years later, if I was working out 5 days a week and now I'm working out like sporadically and I run like never, to think that you could have the same results without the work behind it just doesn't really work. And I guess I thought that maybe stuff should continue to sustain me because I was reading books, I was reading the Bible, and but it was like still I was missing something and I didn't realize it. And it was because it really wasn't defined. But yeah, do you have any other thoughts before we move on to the next section?
No, I think that sums it up pretty good. Yeah, like you said, if you're not up and doing something, you're losing something. And not necessarily mean like doing actual physical activity, but if you're not working on something, you're not refining, and so that you're getting blurry or stale or whatever. You're losing something. So yeah, it's vital to stay into, like you talk about cultivating. It's vital to keep cultivating.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so that kind of brings us into to our last little section here, and that is like, what are the things that you got to cultivate to no end? Like there is no end, right? There is no culmination. There is no like, oh, I've done it enough. I mean,
Yeah.
I thought I did enough sit-ups, but apparently I haven't. So it's like, what are the daily habits and the weekly activities that cultivate your call? What are the things that you have to do, right? Because like for me, when I think about it, it's like, all right, we know like in BT that you read the Bible, and we don't read the Bible because we're religious and because it's like, well, if you don't, then you're gonna go to hell. No, it's like freaking, we read it because there's life in it. Two, you got to read books about growth, right? Or your industry. You got to continue to keep learning and refining. This junk just doesn't end, right? And then exercise, right? We get into exercise. I mean, we don't talk about it a bunch, but we do it. Like
Yeah.
it's a lifestyle. I got my kids, they're homeschooled. And so at 8:00, they got to wake up at 7:30. And then at 8:00, they got to be downstairs, and they have these sandbags, and they do these, 3 rounds of sandbag workouts 5 days a week. Because it's, look, man, it's not only vital, it's vital for your health, but it's vital for your mind. It's vital for your focus. There's a reason we have a body right? That's housing our spirit. All those things are connected. And so I don't think there's anything in life where it ever benefits you to be out of shape.
Yeah, for sure.
And I just think like you don't want to be overwhelmed by life. And so it's like, if you want to become hard, you got to do hard things. If you want to be tough, you got to do tough things. And exercise is one of those things. But then it's like that mindset travels everywhere. It's not just a singular thing. It's like it's in your activities, it's in your purpose, it's in like your whatever you prioritize, whatever. It's in everything you do, that same mentality. So it's necessary.
Right.
But for me, it's like, all right, so I had those non-negotiables and I was doing them. But because those are defined, it's easier to track, right? So it's like I could look back and be like, all right, am I reading? And maybe I look back and I'm like, all right, the last book I finished was like a month and a half ago. Well, all right, it's time to. I either need to get a new book or just grab one off the shelf again and reread it. But I need to get back into it, right? If I'm fat and weak, that means I stopped working out and was eating too many cookies. So it's time to get back on the path, right? Because I have those things defined, it's easy to know if I'm getting off track. But see, there's this thing, and for like 2 years, man, it went dormant, kind of. And it's like, I was aware of it, but I didn't know what to do. And it was because it was undefined. So the question is like, what is the daily habits and the weekly activities that you have to cultivate that continue to cultivate your call? And for me, I really had to think about BT, and I was like, well, what is it? And this is a question, as we talk about the path of purpose and vision, is that you don't have all the details in the beginning. And there is this process of like refining and defining and reviewing and thinking, and you're thinking, but nothing's coming to you. And it's like, you're trying to put in the work and nothing's coming and whatever. I mean, Abraham's like the covenant where it's like had the details. It took 24 years from the time that he first got the promise. Like the straight up details didn't come for 24 years. So That's a real part of the process. But for me, yeah, I'm like, all right, I got to define what is BT, like what are the things I got to cultivate. And so it's like I had to define like what is success. And then so it's like, for me, it's like, all right, like my job is to communicate ideas, concepts, principles, and truth, right? And you could just sum all those things up as to say they're the same thing. But it's like you got to communicate these things, big, small, whatever. Success is communicating those things. So then the question is, okay, well, how do you do that, right? So that's kind of like, here's your main push, but then how does that turn into action and results? So it's like the way I communicate that is through articles, podcasts, videos, and programs, right? So those are all very specific things. Success is communicating these ideas. So that means to have an idea to communicate, that means you got to cultivate. You got to think about, because that was the part that I was missing. I was just saying, well, it's just going to come to me. I'm like, no, it's not going to come to you. You can stand outside all you want and be like, I want this tree to grow. And if you don't ever freaking plant the tree, that junk ain't going to grow. And then if you don't take care of it, it won't grow. It's like nothing. It's not just going to come to you. You got to work it. And that was the disconnect that I had. That those guys like, bro, what are you doing over there?
Yeah.
Nothing. He's like, right.
Correct.
I saw that.
You are correct.
Oh, man. Yeah, so you got to define. You got to define what are the things that are non-negotiables. So for us, we know reading the Bible, reading books, growth books. If you're reading just those nonfictions, that's like watching TV. I watch TV, but like growth books, right? Exercise. It's non-negotiable. It's part of our habits. It's just part of what we do. But then it's like, okay, then what else? What else are those non-negotiables that are going to keep you tight and right? One thing is like your relationships, I think there's that, Paul said it, I think. He's like, oh, maybe it's Hebrews, whoever wrote that one. But he's like, don't stop meeting with one another. And I think sometimes, we've just taken that in as like I think that, let me phrase it a different way. That can take a lot of forms, whatever that means. And whoever that is actually with. But it's like, don't stop meeting with one another is a real one. And that one's super easy, out of sight, out of mind kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's never really out of mind, though. It's just out of action.
Right.
But yeah, and then just defining what are those things that really cultivate your call. Like, how are you activating whatever it is? Like, whatever it is, however it is, whatever you got to do, volunteer or whatever, start something, go join something else where you can use your gifts. Like, what are the things that cultivate your gift that keep feeding it, right? Because it ain't just going to happen, people.
Right.
It's because what God gave you was in the form of potential.
Yeah.
And it's not void of effort. It just is not.
Right.
Or at least I haven't figured out how to do it.
No, I think there's a reason we haven't yet. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, it's interesting. Defining the non-negotiables. Yeah, cultivation just takes awareness and effort too, like we've talked about. Yeah. No awareness equals, like you don't put in the right effort. And like no effort, no matter how aware you are, if there's no effort, you still can't change anything. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I was thinking too, like we get this wrong view of humility too, where it's like, well, I need to be humble, and humility, turns out to, at least for me, like in my past, it was like, humility just means staying in the background. There's nothing good in me. A disbelief in myself and abilities. Like humility becomes this wrong thing. It's like, well, the Bible says to be humble, and I think that means just becoming a doormat and just not doing anything.
Yeah.
But it's like humility. Like I was thinking this morning, like humility without if humility doesn't have wisdom and insight or awareness, like it's not humility anymore. Like you have to pair, like wisdom and humility go hand in hand. Like if you don't have wisdom with humility, it's just you're just going to remain weak. But if you have wisdom with humility, those two that have to be together, I think to form the humility that the Bible talks about, then it's like you're humble, but you have courage and you have discipline and you have determination. You know, there's still selflessness, like you're still doing something for the greater good, but there's perseverance and perspective. Yeah, so it's like that idea of humility too. It's like don't get caught up in, well, I just need to be humble right now, and that requires me to just be kind of timid and in the background. And
Yeah.
yeah, so like humility doesn't mean weakness and stagnance. It's like you're not getting anything done. Like humility is going out and doing something awesome, doing something great, and then being like, yeah, I'm just the medium to do this. Like I'm just I'm just the asset to be able to do this. You know.
I think it's even more than that, though, because, you know, it's like people, you know, not to get too crazy, but people talk about surrender a lot. And, you know, I started to ask, is that even in the Bible?
That's always a good question.
I'm like, well, because, you know, it's like, okay, people are like, well, you got to surrender to the Lordship. But I was like, for me, it's like, I'm not saying surrender isn't a real thing. But I saw oftentimes, like, you hear it a lot. And for me, the thing that's like, everything flows from the reality of sonship. So it's like, this is where identity truly flows, is meant to flow from anyway, is sonship, right? And like a father and his kids, you know, or, you know, and the example that we would have is like, you know, our mothers and fathers and families. And it's like working together on purpose. Like I have no need, no desire for my kids to have a low self-concept. Like, in fact, a low self-concept would be a shame to me. Like, if my kids were like, well, you know, just thank you so much for letting me be in the family. I'm like, what? If my kid said something stupid like that, I'd be like, what is wrong with me? What did I do? You know what I'm saying? Like, my kids don't ask for my attention. They take it, right? My Ethan comes up and he'll punch me in the back. And sometimes it's quite surprising. But it's just like, he's just like, you know, let's fight, let's wrestle. It's like, my kids don't ask for my time. They don't ask for my attention. They don't ask for my affection. They have it and they take it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, sonship is the true reality of the kingdom. You belong. You're legitimate. You're, it's like when you understand sonship and the fact that you're loved. And we were talking about this. We got this paper called the I Am paper. And it's a paper we made, printed out. And, you know, like as a family, we'll read it out sometimes. And it's just like, all right, because we got to shape that self-concept, right? Train a child in the way they should go and they won't depart from it. And so it's like, you know, we're taking all the things that we've learned and we're teaching our kids, and we're teaching, you know, we're on this podcast, we're trying to share these ideas so that BT creates a pathway that we can all walk on, where we're taking these truths and these realities and actually have a pathway to apply them. I feel like a lot of stuff out there's plenty of stuff that's legit kingdom epic, but there's also a lot of stuff that's like, it's useless. It has absolutely no use. It seems good. It seems like it holds some value and righteousness, but it's stupid. It's incorrect. And it just causes you to run into circles. But what we're after is actually things you can actually use, because that's the kingdom. If you can't use it, you should probably lose it.
Right.
And so we got this I Am paper. And the first one is that I'm loved. And we were talking about, it's like, all right, you know, it's just like, asked my wife. I was like, like when you think about like I am loved, like what does that speak to you? And then, I thought about it, she thought about it, and then we did it at our BT group, and we all kind of came up with the same thing. And it was like, it's like, I am loved is at the core of your identity. It's like, it's the basis of your self-concept, right? Everybody was like, it's like, I'm loved, period. Like, there is nothing else. There is no other side to that. It's just period. And
Yeah.
I was like, I am loved. It's like, it legitimizes my existence, right? Like,
Yeah.
it validates my existence. So that junk is powerful. I mean, it's like when the core of who you are is validated. Now we're moving in sonship.
Right.
If we think it's like, well, let me just get out the way, there's a verse in Romans 8, like 29 or something. And he's like, those he called, he justified, or he predestined. Those he predestined, he called. Those he called, he justified. Those he justified, he glorified. Like, he glorified us. And it was all in the past tense. And it's just like that false sense of humility. It's like, what it is an erosion of your identity and self-concept. That junk is so destructive because, like you said, true humility is like, yeah, I don't need the credit, or it's not all about me, but it's like, I understand my place. And because I don't need, I mean, we all want affirmation, and that's all real, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's like, I don't have this crazy need, right? Like, I know that the work that I'm doing, the effort I'm putting in, and sometimes I got to recalibrate my perspective. That's for sure. But it's like, no, I'm exercising what I'm doing it on purpose. Right? Like,
Right.
I'm not doing it for the affirmation. I'm doing it because this is my call and this is my purpose. That's the validation, right? Like,
Right.
I'm going somewhere. The work that I'm doing is leading me somewhere. Even the mundane stuff or the whatevers, it's leading me somewhere. It's like, whatever. But
Right.
yeah, just that false sense of humility that disintegrates your self-concept is from hell and should be
Right.
burned and shot to death.
And it takes
Just that idea, not the person, just the idea. Got a little graphic there.
the passion's real.
Burned at the stake. No.
Yeah, no, a couple things came to my mind as you were talking. Like, we talked about our non-negotiables, but I think God has non-negotiables too, and his non-negotiable is that you will be loved, that we will be loved. Like, that's a non-negotiable for him. It's like you said, you are loved, period. And so that was kind of a truth that kind of hits hard too, when you're like, especially when you feel like you're out there on your own, but God has non-negotiables too. And yeah, then it's like trying to go full circle back to cultivation. It's like, yeah, that false sense of humility prevents you from taking care of what you're supposed to manage and steward. It's a preventative thing.
Yeah.
It allows you to stay kind of without accountability, without responsibility, without the possibility of maybe something great happening or something bad happening. It's like, it allows you to not have to know what the consequences to your actions might be, like the good actions, like the good plan that you have. It allows you to just kind of just not know and not have to worry about it.
Right. It's like it doesn't seem like this, at the time, but it's like, it's a distraction from your purpose.
Yeah.
Right. Because like you're saying, it's like, all right, well, I'm just not supposed to do anything. I'm not supposed to do anything great.
Right.
And so therefore you don't. But
Right.
then you're only consumed with guilt and shame and like, oh, I'm not good enough and oh, blah, 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 wah, wah, wah. It's not life. But what it is it's like, it's this false idea that seems like it justifies and validates, like, I'm not supposed to do anything. These dreams and these lofty things I see and the value I feel, sometimes I get, you get into a mentality where you're like, man, I feel like I could really do something. And then you go back to the old men's mindset that's like, no, man, you got to wait on the Lord. You got you got to fast and pray. And
Yeah.
you got to give all your desires back to God. So it's like here you were on the path, you're in this moment, God's talking to you, you're getting these downloads, you're seeing your potential, who you could be, who you should be, what you should get into. But then you got this old mentality that says, hey man, all that stuff, you got to just give it back. No, God just gave it to you to freaking do something with it.
Right.
Well, listen, people, and then people are like, well, I just want Jesus to return. I'm telling you, it did not go well for the guy who was given one talent, who buried it. It didn't go well for that guy.
Right.
It didn't. I'm telling you, I'm pretty sure in one of the stories, the guy got chopped into pieces. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure it did not go well for that guy.
Yeah.
People are like, well, I just want Jesus. I'm like, you haven't done anything.
Right. Right. At least earn some interest.
You got nothing to show. And it's not like this fear thing, but it's just like when you're only death-minded, right? Like, well, we got to get out of here. It's just so dark. It's like, what? What's like you miss the whole point. People are like, do you know where you're gonna go where you die? What am I gonna do tomorrow while I'm alive?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I was given this body whilst I'm on earth, and I was put here to do something with it.
Right.
But that's a different mentality. It's a different mentality, but it's the right mentality. And so it's like, everything else is just it doesn't look like it. I mean, nobody's, you're not like intentionally, because I've been there, we've been there. You're not intentionally, because your whole mission is to like, I want to be connected with God and please God, but you got these contrary messages that are just straight up wrong. And it's wrong because of what it produces. Circular thinking, guilt and shame, low self-concept. None of this junk is the kingdom.
Right.
The results of what you do matters. It's like, it's just funny, all the stuff coming to mind because I've been cultivating it. That's how it works, I guess. But it's like, what was I talking about? Nope, lost it. I was cultivating something good, but I lost it.
Well, maybe you sent it over to me, and I can.
Did you got it?
Maybe, yeah. But I was just thinking, as you were talking, like what you cultivate, you ultimately create, right? So even if you're not cultivating something, you're going to ultimately create something, and eventually, if you're not cultivating something, good, something that you're supposed to steward, something that your purpose, then you're going to cultivate something, and it's probably going to just end up being worthless. Whether it's just a lot of wasted time or a lot of wasted potential, you can still cultivate those things by lack of not cultivating something good.
Well, right. There's this quote, and it says, in the absence of clearly defined goals, we become strangely loyal to performing daily trivia until we ultimately become enslaved by it. So it's like, just like you said, so without clear direction, without a clear purpose, without clear objectives, or like, what are my non-negotiables, we tend to become strangely loyal to just daily trivia. So just getting by, just doing the bare minimum, just like going through the motions. If you're not intentionally doing stuff to move forward, you get sucked in to just the daily stuff, which then ultimately becomes a habit that then your life is shaped around. And if you don't have a new idea and are able to put forth new effort, you're just going to keep running in circles.
Yeah.
That's not it, man. Life is forward moving progress and growth, and that is true.
Yeah, if you're given a blank piece of ground, something's ultimately going to grow there, whether it's something you plant or something that's there inevitably. Weeds, whether it's in the mind or the actual literal sense, something's going to grow there, whether you want to cultivate it or not. You're going to cultivate something or something's going to grow there. And then you have to give an account for what grows there. And that's the dangerous part, where it's like, well, like the guy that that buried the money. It's like, well, something grew, look at all these plants. And it's like, but they're not the right, like you didn't cultivate the right plants.
I got roots on these babies.
Like, don't go bury the money. Don't go and
Right.
just wait for something to grow.
Well, yeah, well, that's like, Earl Nightingale in Lead the Field talks about that. It's like, if your life is like a plot of ground,
Yeah.
what does it look like? And it's just like, the Bible talks a lot about management, and true management, like Miles would talk about, is that you're not just maintaining the status quo. There's an expectation of increase and development, right? Like, leave it better than you found it.
Yeah.
That's the kind of concept, right? So it's like, at your house, it's like there should be clearly defined walkways, right? It shouldn't look like a jungle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, but it's like that stuff matters. And so it's like, but it's a way of thinking though. And your life can look like that. And they say, right, like your outward environment is a reflection of your inner environment. So if it's circular and chaotic, right? That's because that's what your insides look like. But if it's organized and tight and right, or when it gets messy, you see that and then you organize it, make it tight and right? That's just a reflection of who you are and what you do. And it's like your results matter. Oh, that's what it was. John Maxwell said it like this. He said, good intentions are overrated. Good actions are what is needed. And it's because, listen, you cannot use my good intentions. Oh, well, I thought about calling you. I intended to call you. I thought, man, this would be wonderful if we connected, but I don't call you. That doesn't benefit you. It doesn't benefit me. It's like, man, I could do this, or I could create this, or I could see this program, or I could whatever. I had, it seemed like a good idea. I got all excited and warm and fuzzy about it, but I never did it. That you can't use that. The only thing you can use is what we actually do, what we actually create, right? You cannot measure good intentions because they don't create anything. But you can measure good actions because it actually produces results. And I just think results matter. I think people justify and say, well, it's the thought that counts. No, I think it's not that like, it's not that, every action you take, it's like, I'm not talking about perfectionism, right? Like your results matter, but I mean like your results matter, meaning that like you're consistently putting forth effort and you have proof.
Yeah.
A lot of people talk about the stuff they're never going to do as if they're going to do it. Well, I would rather do the thing first and then show you it.
Right.
But there's a benefit in both, but it's like in saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. But the point is dude, we were put on this earth to produce and to create. Period. Like that, like creation, your ability to see something that doesn't exist yet and then pull it into reality for it to benefit you and the people around you. That's divine. That's your divine nature. It's not the only expression of divine nature, but that is a legitimate, for reals, divine expression that you hold inside of you, that you are. It is a natural, like, expression. It's natural. You're meant to see wonderful things and then use your hands, your mind, your tools to create it.
Yeah.
It's real. It's like last year we built a shed, big old shed, and hot dang, that thing took a while to build. And I was just thinking, I was like, you know what? Like we could have paid to have somebody build it. And I was just like, it's okay that things take effort. It's okay that things take like thinking and problem solving. Yeah. It's okay that you got to work it out. Like it is okay to put forth the effort, to strain, to push, to pull, to work it out, to do the work. It's like, it's okay.
Yeah.
You don't need to just sit down and watch TV. Like it's okay to do, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
So that's the thing, right? So in the absence of clearly defined goals, you become strangely loyal to performing daily trivia until you become ultimately enslaved by it. So what are the non-negotiables? This is important because this stuff determines the trajectory of your life. If the way you think doesn't produce actions, we got a problem. And so it's like, what are these daily habits and these weekly activities that you got to cultivate. So we know 4 of them, right? That was, you got to read the Bible. You got to read books on growth. You got to get into some exercise. I don't care if it's just walking, 10-minute walk. It doesn't matter, whatever that looks like. But you got to be active. And you got to stay connected to people, the right people. And then what are those other things that cultivate your call that you got to get into? Because if they're not defined, then you have no way to track it. If I'm getting fat, I know I'm eating too much crap. But that sugar cereal, you know what I'm saying? It's tasty. Them Fruit Loops.
Sugar squares.
Honeycombs. Yeah. Peanut butter Captain Crunch. It's delicious. But yeah. But what are those things that's like you can actually measure? You can actually look at and be like, all right, I'm either doing it or I'm not doing it. And let me get back into it. My good peoples, it has been good. Thanks for kicking it with us. We're on the move now, my good peoples.
Absolutely.
Keep it real. Define those non-negotiables and freaking create things of value and do it on purpose and do it without any remorse. I will not apologize for the value that I intend to bring. In Jesus' name. My good peoples, until next time, peace.